So hold on to your hat. Apparently, there's a new variant rearing its ugly head around the world when it comes to COVID-19, and this one combines Delta with Omicron. It's being called the Deltacron variant, and it's reportedly been discovered in Cyprus. To talk about this in a little more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, how concerned should we be really now with the Deltacron variant?
Yeah, so we have been waiting for this, and by waiting, we live in a sick world, right? We have the only thing we have to look forward to is variants. Not even look forward to, but obviously everyone's concerned. Why? Because if the Delta variant and the Omicron variant would meet, then they would have the potentiality of being as deadly or as serious as the Delta variant and spreading as fast as the Omicron variant. And that's exactly what has been discovered in Cyprus. Well, so far, there have only been about 25 cases that have been reported. Experts in the lab where this is being studied are saying that they need more time to understand how these two will play against each other in this new variant. But they do believe that in the long term, and here's the good news, that they do believe the Omicron variant will outdo or outperform both the Delta and the Deltacron. So meaning you will only see the Omicron variant in most cases going forward. So that's the good news, but they need more time. Just like everything else, we need more time, more data, more statistics, but this is what's been discovered.
Now, around Christmas time, you actually recovered as well, and you had the Omicron variant, correct?
That's right. My entire family had it, and we've been uber careful for about 2 years, and thankfully the Omicron variant is here. And I say thankfully. At first, I was like, I can't believe I have a positive test. But once I've had worse colds in my life. It's a bad cold, and I know that varies for different people. So I am vaccinated, and it was okay. I mean, it's a cold, and now it's over. So I'm hoping that what they're telling us about immunity individually and herd immunity will come into play, and that we don't have to stop living our lives for this particular variant. I know that the Delta is a different story, and look, I think enough. I think a lot of people are getting this. I know in big cities in the United States, like Los Angeles and in New York City, about 1 in 2 or 1 in 4, 1 or 3. That's all sorts of statistics going on, but a lot of people have it, and these are vaccinated people who are passing it along to each other. So we are hoping that with this, that we do build up our immunity, and that we stop with the masking of children, and we stop with the testing and the forced this and the forced that and all the mandates. So I am a survivor, thank God, of the Omicron variant, and happily, I think we're nearing the end of this, hopefully.
Well, Lisa, we're certainly glad that you're looking and feeling better. Lisa, Iran announced sanctions against more than 50 Americans over the killing of Tehran's top general 2 years ago. The Islamic Republic's foreign minister says the 52 U.S. nationals have been blacklisted. What will that mean for them?
That means they'll have to cancel their summer trips to Tehran, because if they go there, all their assets will be confiscated. That's all it means. This is obviously in jest. It's symbolic move to say we are targeting you, we're getting back at you, we know your names, and to scare people and intimidate them and say, we know your names, we know your identity, we know that you had something to do with the killing of Qasem Soleimani. So obviously, the individuals on this list are Trump-era cabinet members and high-ranking members of the military, anyone who had to do with national security. I happen to know pretty much the entire list. So it's an interesting what company we keep, people who are now sanctioned by the Iranian regime. But it's really just a symbolic move, and it just shows. I'll say this: it shows that the Iranian regime feels that they have such a large upper hand when it comes to the negotiating table, that while they're sitting in Vienna trying to strike a deal with the US and other world powers, trying to get the sanctions removed and go back to a normal economic and otherwise life, they put Americans, high-ranking American officials, on a sanctions list. It's not a good look for them, but it just shows how they know how badly our administration wants it, and that they believe that they can still call the shots while they're sitting at the negotiating table.
Obviously, Washington has taken the threat quite seriously and has said that Iran could face serious consequences if it does, in fact, attack Americans. How far will the Biden administration go? What is White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan saying?
Sullivan's saying, so let's just say it was a symbolic threat, and this is a symbolic threat. He's answering one with another. They put these names on a list. Nothing's going to happen to these individuals. They're not going to go to Iran anytime soon. And then the threat is also a public threat to say if anything happens to any Americans, the United States will respond. Well, I do hope that the United States would respond. But has the United States really responded to any threats coming from Iran? We have seen so many actions against Americans, against terrorism in the region, to our assets. Just this week, we saw that Iranian proxies hit American assets in Iraq. They're hitting American assets in Syria. They're hitting American assets in Lebanon and elsewhere. So have we really taken any threat coming from the Iranian regime seriously? Or is the administration here in the United States so gung-ho about getting that Iran nuclear deal that they will look the other way, just like they have with everything else? Look, like I said before, the Iranian regime knows that the administration in Washington wants to steal very badly, or else they wouldn't be chest thumping and saber rattling the way that they are and have been. And they will continue with this behavior. They have not stopped pouring money into terrorism. They have not stopped with the suicide bombings. They have not stopped shooting at their own protesters on the ground in Iran as we speak. That's going on. So, again, symbolic, and we'll see, maybe, and I hope I'm wrong, but an announcement about an Iran nuclear deal being announced very soon, because that's what they're going towards. If logistics, if these points had anything to do with it, we wouldn't be at that negotiating table, and that's the bottom line.
Okay, let's chat a bit now what's happening with Russia and Ukraine. Russia says it will not make any concessions under U.S. pressure and warned that talks on the crisis in Ukraine might end early. Washington said no breakthroughs were expected and progress depended on de-escalation from Moscow.
There you have it. I think you just summarized it really well, Hal. It's to say they came to do talks. Obviously, the subject of the talks is de-escalation, to have the Russians pull back their assets from the Ukrainian border. If you remember, the Ukrainians claim that the Russians have about 100 to 150,000 troops on the border there. That is no accident. That is no military drill, as Putin claimed it was. And in good faith, or again, in a symbolic move, Putin moved back 10,000, so not even 10% of the troops that were there, right? And now, as they're supposed to meet, this looks like it's going to be, a dead on arrival. The Russians have said, we will make no compromises, no concessions under U.S. pressure. So don't even try to talk us out of this. Very, very, very difficult situation. And again, we see that the foreign policy here out of Washington is, look, you can just connect the dots around the map and see how everything is going haywire, because the global community, or more so our adversaries, don't feel like there is a leadership coming out of Washington. They feel like there's a very different tune. So when you have that lax attitude and then you try to be a stickler or try to call a meeting, well, of course, your enemies are going to be able to call the shots. Of course, they're going to be able to appear strong. For Putin, he's getting brownie points at home to say, to his own constituents, to say, I spoke up to the United States. I kind of told them that I'm not going to make any compromises. And that's the way it'll be seen, as he is the victor, and he's not going to allow the United States to diminish him or his actions.
Tragedy in Kazakhstan as 164 people were killed, including a 4-year-old girl, in a week of protests that marked the worst unrest since the former Soviet Republic gained independence 30 years ago. And Lisa, close to 6,000 people have also been detained. Tell me more.
Yes, things aren't calming down anytime soon over there. Just a bit of background. These protests started in response to both fuel and gas price hikes that went up almost 100% overnight.
Wow.
Overnight. And I will remind you that this is a country that has very rich reserves in gas, natural gas, minerals, and this governing party has been in power since 91. That's when the Soviet Union fell and they had independence and autonomy. It has been so much for that independence and autonomy, where there has been one political party in place for 30 years. So it's turned into a dictatorship of sorts. And now the people are speaking up. So it's always that little catalyst. So in this case being, the price of fuel and gas. And it's usually something like that, some basic goods that allow, the price of basic goods or jobs or the economy that force people people out onto the streets, but it's always the undercurrent is much larger and much more of on a macro scale. In this case, they are protesting their government. So all eyes are on Kazakhstan. We know that the Russians got involved. They sent their troops in. That's going to play a big role into what Russia's doing in Ukraine and their talks with the United States as well. We'll have to keep an eye on what's going on the ground there.
Now, here's a nice feel-good story, Lisa. A baby who was lost in the chaos of the airlift out of Afghanistan has been found and returned to his family.
Hal, you don't even know the amount of relief that I felt when I saw this story. I think many of us saw these viral videos that went out during that chaos in Afghanistan. If you remember the crowds trying to leave the airport in Kabul, and you see this one little baby wrapped up in a blanket being passed from, all these gentlemen are trying to get their families and pushing the crowds out of the way. And this little baby, 2-month-old Sohail, was being passed around, and then he is handed to someone in a military uniform and separated obviously from his family. And when I originally saw this video, I could not get the thought of this baby out of my mind for such a long time. And now after 4 months, he has been reunited with his family. And here's the story. A taxi driver, a 29-year-old taxi driver at the airport, took this baby home and raised him as his own. And it was very difficult for him to give back the baby. Actually, he resisted to give back the baby because he had bonded with this child. They found him after 7 weeks of kind of negotiating back and forth. He delivered the baby back to his family. So we're so happy for this little baby and their family. And I hope that taxi driver is able to stay in this baby's life as a godfather or some sort of figure in some way. But like you said, in all of this chaos, finally a feel-good story.
Yeah, it's an incredible story. Lisa, the Taliban has arrested a very popular Afghan professor who's been quite critical of the government there.
Yes, that's the message that the Taliban is sending. Despite what we're hearing out of Washington, D.C., that the Taliban can be worked with, that this is a new and improved Taliban from the 90s, we're seeing something much worse than the Taliban of the 90s because they actually have a sovereign nation, a solidified position, and they will have formal roles around the world, and they will be included in the international community. That's what's worse. On a day-to-day basis, they are not giving women any rights. They're not giving young girls any rights. They're not giving them equal education. If you speak out against the Taliban, you will be arrested. You will become a symbol of what the Taliban is capable of doing and what people should not do, which is speak out against this government. So we see a lot of professors, a lot of journalists, teachers being rounded up, and of course being made an example of. This is horrific, and I know that we have taken our eyes off of Afghanistan. And I understand we're living at a time where each one of us is dealing with our own struggles and in our own local cities and states and countries. But let's not take our eyes off of Afghanistan. And I thank you, Hal, for bringing that to attention every week to continue talking about Afghanistan and the plight of the people and the Afghan people there, and those who are brave enough to speak out and have to face this destiny.
Lisa, we lost veteran Hollywood actor Sidney Poitier at the age of 94. Then sadly, Betty White was just a little shy of her 100th birthday. And over the weekend, we also lost comedian Bob Saget, who rose to fame with the TV series Full House. He died at the tender age of 65. What do we know at this point?
Oh, this is so sad. Honestly, so sad. He was robbed of so many good years. He was in the middle of doing a comedy tour, and he was found in his Orlando hotel room. So far, they have ruled out any foul play or drug use. Who knows what this could be? Potentially something health related that was sudden. I know that his friends and family have come out in shock. Obviously, as you said, at a young age, and someone who we all have so many fond memories of. Full House and America's Funniest Home Videos, and then becoming more of a raunchy comedian and being finally able to say bad words, as he always used to say. So we all remember him very fondly, and I know we'll get more details as time goes on, but doesn't really matter. We're very upset about losing him and losing so many of these greats. But they had these they're almost 100, as you said, the other two. But Bob Saget, he was young and had many years ahead of him, and our thoughts are with his family and friends right now.
Yeah, he was found at his hotel suite in Orlando, Florida after performing at a nightclub, doing his stand-up routine. And I saw his tweet as well saying how he was excited to be back on tour again and he's really addicted to the comedy routines. And so it's quite shocking that he passed away and an autopsy is going to be performed. So hopefully, like you said, we'll get some more answers. U.S. correspondent and our regular contributor, Lisa Daftari, thanks for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.